Donald Trump is once again on the receiving end of an ass whooping by a conservative media outlet. Now, as we all know, the Wall Street Journal here in the United States has been very vocal in their opposition to Donald Trump's economic policies, and now it seems that The Telegraph, one of the most conservative and largest papers in the UK, is also taking a shot at Donald Trump over the tariffs, which they say is the largest tax hike in history. And for the record, they're not wrong about that. But here is what Matthew Lynn, columnist for The Telegraph, had to say. By far most likely is that much of the increased costs will be passed on to consumers in the form of higher prices. Either they will be forced to pay more for imported goods, or prices may rise in general because U.S. companies have less of an incentive to improve productivity thanks to the protections afforded by that tariff wall. And if tariffs do raise $600 billion annually, that is no small sum of money even for an enormous economy like the United States. But even if we assume that Elon Musk manages to cut $1 trillion or more out of the budget, the tariffs would have to be at least 5 or 6 times larger than anything yet proposed to cover Washington's annual expenditure. They would need to be at least 100% and possibly more simply to replace the federal income tax. Tariffs at that rate would be off the scale and would do huge damage to the global trading system. At risk of stating the obvious, if trade collapses to zero because of tariffs, then tariff revenue would also be zero. He has one more thing to say, and I'll get to that in a moment. But first, let's examine a few of the things he said here. Either they will be forced to pay more for imported goods, or prices may rise in general because U.S. companies have less of an incentive to improve productivity thanks to the protections afforded by that tariff wall. This kind of hits on something that I have talked about a lot in the past. When Donald Trump initiated his first trade war during his first term, prices of foreign-produced goods did go up. But you know what also happened? Goods produced here in the United States also went up. And they went up to remain competitive price-wise with the foreign products. And one of the biggest examples, I always use are washers and dryers. So, when you had the American-made appliances not subjected to the tariffs versus the foreign-made products that were, the American-made products also increased their prices. They were still a little bit lower than the competitors, but not low enough to make them the only option. But they did that because we can squeeze out a few more bucks in profit, so why not do it? The tariffs are giving us that shield, as Lynn points out. And that is such an important point that I think has gotten lost in all of the tariff conversation. It does not incentivize American companies to do better. It incentivizes them to raise their prices, by 2 or 3%, maybe that's very low, 10 to 15% more likely, because others have to raise their prices by 25. Their products are still needed, so if they can squeeze a couple extra bucks out of consumers, by God, they're going to do it. And that is what Lynn is warning about. The second one, even if these tariffs raise revenue, it's going to be pennies compared to how much the government spends every year. It's going to be so little that it's going to be virtually inconsequential to the federal government. In other words, we're inflicting all this harm on everybody and getting basically nothing in return. And then he concludes with this. So Trump is about to impose a huge tax rise, and the blunt truth is that, like any other tax rise, it will crush the American economy. Again, not wrong. Tariffs are a tax on the American people. The companies that bring in the imported goods pay the tariff to the U.S. government. The foreign companies, they don't have to do that. It's us that does it. Those companies then raise the prices on consumers, typically higher than what the tariff rate is. So if it's a 25% tariff that they pay, they'll likely raise their prices 30% so they can squeeze out a little extra profit. We get screwed the entire way because tariffs are a tax on us. Thanks for watching, everybody. And if you're not already, please subscribe to the channel. We got fresh content every day for you. And If you want to follow us across social media, make sure you check out all of the social links that we have posted in the description of this video.